Welcome back, everybody, to Dreamhack Valencia 2016. Hope you guys are getting comfortable. That was a pretty long series, but we're not done yet. In fact, we're just kind of halfway through our round of 16 here in day number 2 of our Grand Prix. So here to cast next series, we have Sottle and Nimsh, dynamic duo. They're going to be bringing you guys Crane, who's a player that we've been looking at for upcoming for a while. I mean, you know him on fellow Team Complexity, and we'll see how well he's been able to do. Up against C4mlann, a player that people may have seen him do well on ladder several seasons, and they're probably seeing his name rise up through the ranks. Can he carry this momentum and finally cement his legacy as one of the players in Europe to be respected? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I've met C4mlann for the first time at Insomnia, and I was surprised that he was doing so well in the Swiss tournament.
Yep.
And then I realized he's actually a very popular German streamer, so he might not be that well known worldwide, but he's definitely supported by the German community. And he's a great player himself. He was playing at Dreamhack Summer, so he already has the experience. And I think he was also playing poker before. So overall,
Yes.
C4mlann is an experienced player and a player geared towards winning the tournament.
Yeah, same as you, Nimsh. First time I really got exposed to him was at Insomnia. I'd bumped into him in a couple of open tournaments like a long time ago, months and months back, and seen him around on ladder a couple of times, but got to meet him at Insomnia, was impressed. Generally, like the way I gauge my impression of players is sort of 10% watching them play, 90% talking to them about the game, right? You can kind of ascertain how high a level people are thinking about the game when you actually like talk and communicate and talk about matchup ideas and stuff. And C4mlann was a player that like really impressed me. Has a lot of smart ideas about the game. I think thinks about the game in a very intelligent way.
Yeah, if only we judge casters by that same measurement too. Just kidding. Like, they didn't really find that very entertaining. I thought that was hilarious. It's got to know your audience, I guess. So previewing the series, I think you guys were mentioning that they have very similar lineups across the board. So they're bringing the very aggressive, standard, very powerful, I call it the core 4 decks right now, where you have Zoo Warlock, Aggro Shaman, Dragon Warrior, and Token Druid.
Yeah.
And, I mean, with this lineup, I think you're fully anticipating to ban Warrior.
Yep.
And then just kind of rolling to see which... I mean, when you have similar lineups, it does end up becoming a little bit coin flippy, but maybe we do see a little bit of tech choices, maybe decision differences as well.
There are
But
some.
this is where I dip out. So, boys, enjoy.
Thanks so much for that.
Watching anticipation on the side.
Talking about the differences, there are some. There is, I believe, Deathwing in one of the decks, and in one of the decks there's Onyxia. So some big dragons are lurking
Right.
in the deck list. The players, they do know their own deck list and opposing deck list. So there's that information for sure.
Yeah, this is a situation that Crane particularly wanted to avoid. He decided to just go with the power lineup for this tournament because he didn't think there was a counter lineup that was strong enough to beat how powerful these 4 decks were. But the thing that he said to me was like the downside of bringing this lineup is that I don't want to play mirror matches all the time because aggro mirrors particularly are quite often very curve dictated, and if Crane is going to play mirror matches, he'd rather play control mirrors where there's like 20 turns worth of decisions where you can outplay your opponent. So this was his kind of drawback to bringing this lineup, that he'd face a lot of mirror matches. So be interested to see if sort of that prediction of the curse is going to come back to bite him now.
Yeah, but hey, he's in the top 16 with that lineup,
He is,
so
exactly.
definitely the lineup worked for him. Lineup-wise, there is a small difference here because the Warrior was in fact banned for Crane, but Crane banned the Zoo from C4mlann, so he has a bit of a different strategy overall. But the first game we're going to see is Shaman versus Shaman, which is all about trading minions.
Yeah, funnily enough, the battle of the 2 face decks comes down to trading minions. It really is all about that fight for board control early. You can see really strangely inefficient things being done just to make sure that you get total board control. Lava Burst being used on low-value minions, for example. But Squire into Flame Tongue Totem is one of the most powerful openings for sure.
It's super good, and C4mlann obviously having an advantage now. Crane has to somehow respond to this, and one of the things that comes to mind is Tusker Totemic. Totem Golem is also a thing that can it's not really challenged. Also, you can go for Finley and Lightning Bolt, but what do you prefer here, Solo?
I think so. Finley Lightning Bolt is kind of the reactive play where you just put what's on the board. Just you set up to deal with that right away. Any other play just doesn't really deal with the Flame Tongue Totem. So if you play Tusker Totemic, most of the time you're losing your 3/2 body directly to that 3/1 Squire. So the initiative is just passed straight back to your opponent, but The problem with the Finley Lightning Bolt play is that, yeah, you leave a 1-1 on the board that's contested by your 1-3, but the follow-ups that you expect from the Shaman, you don't really contest those too well. But all things considered, I think that Flame Tongue Totem, as we've just said, this battle is all about board control early on. Flame Tongue Totem left around is one of the best tools around for board control, so I think you just have to take care of it with the Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, I agree, because if there is Feral Spirit next turn, it will be really troublesome. Definitely get rid of the Flanking Totem. Because specifically, your Finley contests the 1-1, and you got a Fire Blast. This is one of the better hero powers you can get in this matchup, because it will help you so much to deal with the minions that your opponent has.
Yep, I mean, Feral Spirit is still a little bit of a problem here because it would protect the 1-1, but it looks like c4mlann is just going to favor the play that lets him curve out more consistently. He can now play 2 Tunnel Trogs next turn into the Feral Spirits on turn 5. Oh, he'll be 1 mana 2 overloaded for that, so it falls a little bit short of just fulfilling his curve here, but still the potential of another Flame Tongue Totem coming out of the Tuskar Totemic, for example.
Totem Golem as well.
Yeah, Totem Golem, even Taunt Totem was
even
actually
Mana
fairly
Tide
effective.
would actually be really good overall, because it stays on board. It's really hard to deal with.
Basically, what we're trying to say, Tuskar Totemic
Was
is
good.
a pretty good card. Yeah.
That was a really good play on that specific turn.
Yeah.
So now it's Crane again to decide how do we trade into this board, and he can't really clear it. So the biggest body on board can be the 3-4, but then if you go for Tuskar Totemic that we hyped up so much, you can actually have maybe Totem Golem and Tuskar Totemic at the same time, but you are losing initiative.
Yeah, it's awkward. You can't make any real play that allows you to Doomhammer 2 effectively next turn. This is the closest you can get, but it will still, you'll be a 4-mana turn overloaded for 1, so the coin doesn't get you there to the Doomhammer, and getting down the early Doomhammer when you still have enough life to play with is huge in this matchup, because as we said, you don't just equip Doomhammer and start wailing on the face. You use the Doomhammer to get maximum
To
board
kill the
control.
minions.
And then with your 2 or 3 minions that survive on the board as you're clearing them, you catch up that damage race so quickly that you've just tanked on your own face by clearing their stuff.
c4mlann has such a nice play here. Just kill the 3-4 with the 3-2 and the 1-1 and play double Totem Golem. You overload yourself for 2, but the next turn you'll be able to play either the Lava Burst or Feral Spirit, so you still have the flexibility you want, and you have a really solid board.
Well, yeah, I mean, Totem Golem's such a dominant early game card here, and Crane is just going to be relying on Tuskar Totemic, but this doesn't look as good as the Tuskar Totemic on average that we saw from the other side. But at the same time, the Feral Spirits that he just drew, which is his other 3-mana option, that just gets devoured instantly by the Totem Golems as well, and that has the extra downside of, again, locking him out of that Doomhammer on the follow-up.
Yeah, if there will be no lock, then maybe you can consider the Trog and coin Feral Spirit to be able to have a 3-3 on board, double 2 freeze, and if the Totem Golems actually trade into the Wolves, you'll be able to trade them out, but then you still don't have the initiative. That's why Tuskar Totemic is a bit better, especially because of the Doomhammer that you've mentioned, and a possibility to play it next turn. Double Lava Burst is not minions, but Feral Spirit is.
Yep. Yeah, and the minions are pretty competitive right now. I mean, 3-2 and a 2-3, those trade into each other, and then the other 2-3 is just competitive against the Finley on the board. He can even choose to pick up value trades on the way preemptively and just protect the board in general. So c4mlann has just got the better early game exchange here, and this is exactly what we've talked about. All the way back to when I was discussing Crane's strategy at the start, we said this matchup is all about early board control, and then when you take that back another step, then it becomes about just who hit a strong curve early on. So,
and it's snowballing pretty hard as well, because if c4mlann decides to trade, and I think there is nothing stopping him from trading into the minions, because he knows the list, he knows there is no Lightning Storm. The only thing that can deal with one of the Totem Golems is the Fire Blast, but then Fire Blast is 2 mana, so you can't play much more than that Fire Blast. So if you go for the Doomhammer and Rockbiter, you will be able to deal with the Wolves, but you still have double Totem Golem right there. You can Fire Blast and go for a Rockbiter and Feral Spirits, and then you will be able to play to kill the 3-1, kill one of the 2 frees. It's not bad, actually. Is there anything better that you see?
I mean, that looks like the strongest play to contest the board right now, but then because you're using the coin with that play, right, again, you're locked out of Doomhammer. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's just so awkward. The board that's been generated from c4mlann here is just exactly what a Crane isn't equipped to deal with because of that lack of Lightning Storm. So it's just hard to find a way back onto the board right now.
And even if you like go for the Doomhammer, Rogue Rider this turn to deal with the 2 freeze, then you take 6 damage to face, or like 3 damage and lose the totem, and then with the Doomhammer you will be able to play Feral Spirit as a follow-up, but still so much damage and not necessarily being able to even kill the totem golems.
So Abusive Sergeant picked up. The hand is now all damage, which means since he hasn't really managed to capitalize on this early board advantage enough to start pushing damage through, if he now starts running out of board development, he has the option, or the possibility that this handful of damage just falls a little bit short, and then there's a window that Crane can sneak back through to get back into this game.
I think this is one of the funny moments when you see Lava Burst into Trog. Like this is basically this matchup is all about killing minions, where in other matchups you would love to Lava Burst face. In this matchup you're like, sure. Like even at sometimes I've seen games where there was like Lava Burst into Feral Spirit. Because that was actually giving you an advantage.
Half a Feral Spirit, right? Yeah. All right, so 3 out of 5 targets on the board right now are pretty great for the Flame Juggler. You can even rock bite a weapon down the existing 2/3.
I think you still just play Juggler and then ping whatever is.
Yeah.
Like you ping the free one if it survives.
Yep. That looks like the strongest line to me. Keep that Doomhammer Rockbiter combination together. But no, Crane is going to break it up here. So he's just going to try and almost guarantee 75% to get a snipe on a minion here. In fact, he's not even going to play the Juggler. He's going to ping off the 3-1.
100% hit with Fire Blast.
Sure. Rockbiter weapon picked up. So again, no board development. So he is starting to just fall a little bit flat. Hasn't done enough damage where this Lava Burst #2 is just really starting to threaten lethal. But if he was to pick up his Doomhammer here, then we'd be in a position where that Lava Burst and Rockbiter can really back it up to push for damage.
I think one of the biggest cards that he can get is actually Finley into life tap, because right now he's just he just lost the board, and Crane this is really surprising, but he's turning this game around. He has this Fire Blast, he has Doomhammer to continue trading, and c4mlann doesn't really have minions.
I mean, I brought up this possibility. I said he just drew damage back to back for like 3 or 4 turns. I said he just might not be able to get there. And now it's just a point where, now weirdly enough, this game has gone wrong because he's only drawn damage. But his solution to that is now draw more damage in exactly the form of Doomhammer. So it's going to be really hard for him, just as it was for Crane, to be able to drag himself back onto this board now that he's lost it, especially because there is now that persistent value of the Doomhammer that can start to answer all of his threats.
There is a difference, though, because Crane had minions in the hand. Like, Crane had something to be able to play on board, even though it was a bit awkward because of overloads. c4mlann doesn't really have that pressure at all, so... Do you consider, like, if you could, like, you were mentioning a couple of times Doomhammer with Rockbiter, but maybe you still, like, just go...
I think you have to Rockbiter the 2/3.
Yeah, exactly. You just cannot wait.
Yeah.
You need to stay on board, and something like Flame Reef Faceless can really dominate this game.
Yep. Even without the Rockbiter, if you draw a Doomhammer, you still have a potential race set up, right? Because you have the damage from the Doomhammer plus that Lava Burst. That will be enough to get you there a little bit, like most of the time, and you're still ever so slightly ahead in the damage race, even though your opponent's ahead of you with the Doomhammer being equipped. So just the ping going to go through, and Crane is going to swing here.
Seems like a painful game to c4mlann. It will all hinge on the next couple of draws for both those players, because it can happen that Crane will actually start drawing the burn cards. And second Trog, oh, well, he can play those Trogs and Lava Burst at free too.
He can, yeah.
That's some board presence that doesn't necessarily die to the Doomhammer, and I think this is the moment to do it.
Yeah, and it means also that if he does find some way with the Doomhammer, of course, he can hit one, ping one, for example, just straight away, just to take it out. But since they're being immediately buffed, that is a lot of damage that he's taking to himself. Lava Burst of his own, not the card he'd really be wanting to see, but it's good enough, right? It's just good enough to be able to react to this board.
You clear this board with this hand. You are able to attack one with the... You attack the totem, you attack the free, you ping, you Fire Blast, you Lava Burst. It looks good. And you can even go 2 damage to face with your own totem, so you are on board and you still have tools to deal with the board of your opponent. Something like the Faceless will be devastating.
Yeah, the first like huge minion that gets drawn here is going to have a a pretty big say in like who goes on to win this game. Be it a thing from below, be it a Flame Wreath Faceless. Like that's what these players both need now. Some huge imposing minion that can't be dealt with by the opponent's board presence.
But this only shows like how important Finley is in this matchup and how insignificant is the hero power of Shaman. There is a Doomhammer, so this means you can either go like you definitely play the Doomhammer, but do you go face or do you keep trading?
I mean, so there's 16 damage just in that Doomhammer, which means if you draw one more damage card, you win, in theory. But the other factor in that is, of course, your opponent is trying to kill you at the same time. So do you win the race if you do that? You know, you have to live 4 entire turns to get that all of that damage to go through. That seems unlikely if you're just going face the entire time, especially since you've used 2 Lava Bursts and a Rock Biter already. So I think the Flame Tongue Totem at least has to go down here.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Also, like there's the Fire Blast, so it's not like
Yes.
Crane is going to create a totem every turn. Well, there's no reason not to play the Doomhammer unless Crane is actually playing a Harrison Jones that I've missed in the list.
Yeah, he's just planning out his entire turn before he really acts, that's all. Like, he's definitely going to be played, he's just working out where he wants to send the attack. He does end up taking out the Flame Tongue Totem, and yeah, I mean, I completely agree this is the correct decision.
Like, this is a complete mirror match. We have a Healing Totem, we have a Doomhammer on both sides.
Yeah. One Doomhammer has a little bit more durability left on it, though, which might end up being the telling thing, because Crane, that's got to be considered somewhat of a whiff. It's just not enough pressure here, so the Doomhammer has been picked up from c4mlann, which kind of equalizes the proceedings at the moment, but as we mentioned before, the first really big minion, a thing from below, would be so massive in this matchup right now.
Yeah, or Faceless,
Yep.
exactly. So, like, there's a couple of minions that can really be big, and the 2-1 abusive is not that good. Feral Spirit, though, is quite amazing to be able to block the Windling Doomhammer Crane has. So Feral Spirit is pretty nice. You can still keep killing minions. This game is going back and forth, and I think c4mlann actually gets back in the saddle now.
Yeah, totally agree, and he's going to send the second swing face. Not going to care too much about the healing tome. Flame Wreath!
Yeah, it's a Flame Wreath, but you still take so much damage, though. You can kill one of the wolves here.
Yes, you can. Does involve face tanking, though, which sends you down to 13 already, 11 from the second wolf, and then there's 8 more damage contained just in that Doomhammer. So that Horse Rider starts to get you very close over the course of a couple of turns.
It is a minion that can attack this turn, and this minion that's really hard to kill as well, especially if you don't have any cards in hand. So that Flame Wreath Faceless is an amazing minion, but it did come too late, unfortunately.
Yeah, just potentially one turn too late, maybe 2 turns too late. 'Cause even if it was played the turn before and was then met with the Feral Spirits, that probably would have been just too slow as well.
Because as much as this matchup is all about trading, at some point you can actually go face. You are a face deck in the end.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to get the job done. And is there a way out here for Crane? I don't think so, right? He'd have to remove all damage from the board since there's 4 just from the Doomhammer. He has no possible way of doing that. So actually, as far as Face Shaman mirrors go, that was actually a pretty entertaining one, I think.
Definitely. The back and forth and the planning, the strategy. It's a very intricate matchup. And a lot of people say like the mirror matches are 50-50 coin flip, but like you can outplay your opponents. It's not like c4mlann really outplay Crane, but when you play on ladder, at least, like if you know exactly how this matchup works, you can win most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's a big enough skill disparity between the 2 players involved, then yeah, you can absolutely outplay them. But you know, when 2 players of the highest caliber, like 2 players that you're looking at here, come up against each other, then sure, it does quite often get a little bit draw dependent. But I'm just happy that we didn't see one of those. You know, one player gets a God Curve, the other player gets stomped.
Dice,
right?
yeah, exactly.
It was a game that had some play in it, some decisions, people actually back and forth. So.
And now Crane has a really good answer to this aggro Shaman, which is Zoo. And again, like, what do you think is this matchup? A lot of people say it's really Zoo favored. Some people say it's closer to 50-50 than others think.
Yeah, I'm comfortable saying it's Zoo favored. There's an edge there for sure. But you know, when people start saying crazy things like, "Oh, it's like 70-30 Zoo," like, no way. Like, I don't think it's anywhere near as
what about
bad as
60-40?
I think I'm even quite precious about people calling things 60-40s. I think most people don't appreciate like exactly how favored a 60-40 matchup is, because it's a really big deal, right, for a matchup to actually be 60-40.
So you're like, I'm confident Zoo is favored. It's a strong 50-48.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Yeah. I mean, like maybe 55-45, 57-43,
Okay.
something like that. I mean, it's favored for sure. But if the Shaman player gets the coin and say like Tunnel Trog coin Lightning Bolt, for example, Tunnel Trog coin Rockbiter, which is in fact exactly the hand that we see. If they're able to compete for the board for the first few turns and able to use a Doomhammer for board leverage later on, there's a lot of like routes through this game where the Shaman can stay competitive. And even more so when you start looking at tournament lists and people start to bring that tech twist of one Lightning Storm, which we're not seeing here.
Or even two, actually. Defilor was undefeated in the Swiss, and he was running an Aggro Shaman double Lightning Storm.
Wow.
He did cut, most of the Greek players, actually, they did cut one Argent Horse Rider, and I think one Frink from below, and they were running double Lightning Storm. And it was just catching people off guard all around.
Interesting. But yeah, so there's definitely play in this matchup for the Shaman. I definitely don't think it's like devastatingly bad as a lot of people seem to think it is. But again, like Coin Tome Golem is just another great opening that you can have in this matchup, especially when you can back it up with the variety of options for 1 mana that c4mlann has right now.
Yeah, but there is a good old power overwhelming to deal with it, and c4mlann is overloaded for 1 for sure. And now this board, like 3-2, is quite nice, but you can actually remove it and then go into Feral Spirit next turn. And then on another turn, you will have 2 mana, so you'll be able to go for Trog and Bolt. Looks like there's no other option, actually. You just have to Rockbiter it.
Yeah, almost certainly. You could choose to Bolt it this turn and say that your next turn is Tunnel Trog Rockbiter weapon.
And then you will have a flexible turn because you can play Faceless on 4.
Yes. That's possibly the thinking, but my issue with that play is that, you know, if you're expecting a 3-mana play from Zoo, if you're expecting them to play on curve, Tunnel Trog Rockbiter weapon isn't going to be a turn against any of their expected 3-drops, be it Councilman or be it Imp Gang Boss, but they're perfectly entitled to play, you know, a 1-drop and a 2-drop on turn 3. That happens pretty often. They don't always hit their 3-drop curve.
Absolutely, and especially if you think like this matchup is really bad for Shaman, you sometimes need to take the risks. And that risk will be, I hope they actually have a bad turn, and I will take advantage of that bad turn and set up a better board on my side.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for c4mlann, actually, that was a standard turn from Zud, just an Imp Gang Boss that you would normally expect on turn 3, and he can't do much about it. He can still go for the Trog. Maybe Trog will not be contested. It's like 2 attack into 3 health. But Zoo normally has the buffs, and we can see that they're both of the buffs in the hand. Great.
Yep. So there's merit, honestly, to just totem pass here to potentially set up the thing from below for next turn. But I think in this situation, you'd probably favor playing the 7/7 over the thing from below next turn, which makes the totem a little bit irrelevant. But I mean, as you said, what real value is there to playing the Tunnel Trog? You know, Imp Gang Boss is a great card in Zoo against a lot of matchups, but against aggro specifically, it just crushes them so hard. It's so difficult to deal with, and offers so much board control, so much survivability for Zoo against other aggressive decks that it's such a key card to have on turn 3. And you see there, Crane just straight away, one of the best cards in his deck, Tunnel Trog, just pretty much neutralized and left dead in his hand because of the Imp Gang Boss being on board.
Definitely. And now Crane has a really good turn again, just playing Consummate, playing Abusive, probably killing the totem because there is no point in, I guess, not killing the totem, giving your opponent a chance to abuse a Flame Tongue. So a very good idea there. He is deciding not to even play Abusive because maybe he's thinking about that Faceless. This turn was really bad for c4mlann, and c4mlann has to do something about this game. Maybe even playing around Feral Spirit a bit, if there's like a Trog Feral Spirit, which would create 2 freeze. So what do you think about keeping Abusive in his hand?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me because, like you said, I talked about this in the previous series where I was casting with Raven, where an Abusive on the board does the same 2 damage that an Abusive in your hand does. But that was in the case where it was sort of like trying to get immediate lethal, in which case, like, the idea that the Abusive persists on the board if you use it to buff as opposed to using it to trade in is actually more valuable. So as you said, if he's expecting to have to trade up into either a thing from below, which Crane would have kept track of to know that it currently costs 4 mana, or a 4-mana 7/7 this turn, then the Abusive is more useful to buff from hand than it is on the board, where you would just lose it by throwing it in to deal that 2 damage.
On the other hand, this Abusive would be actually pretty useful to have on board. It would be in the middle, because then with Dark Alpha, it just deals with one of the wolves by itself.
Sure. But I think with the past turn on the previous turn, I think Crane was probably expecting to see a 4-mana play. It could have either been Thing from Below or the 7/7. So against that expected line, it's better to have the Abusive Sergeant in your hand. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Against Feral Spirits, he would have loved to have it on the board right now.
He still has a good way to just deal with the Feral Spirits. Unfortunately for him, the Trog is still on the board. But C4mlann will have only 3 mana next turn, which means he will be forced to either go with the Rockbiter and Squire or something that he draws into.
I think it's a fine play, though. He still has plenty of health yet left to play with, and the Tunnel Trog isn't really going to get too much value on the board, and he has enough of a buffer with his life total to prevent the Tunnel Trog really doing too much damage by going face. So tap Direwolf Abusive Sergeant just definitely seems like the most solid line here.
I think the bigger problem of this matchup from Shaman's perspective is that in the very beginning you just try to trade with Zoo. So like you basically fight for board against Zoo, one of the best decks in the game to keep the board alive. And then you just run out of cards because they life tap and you can't life tap. So you can win this if you get Finley into life tap, for example, or Finley into Fire Blast to have like this extra support with the fight for board. But if you don't, you just run out of steam.
Yeah, but there's cards in your deck that can kind of serve as your card draw. I mean, the theory of this build of Aggro Shaman that got so popular is that they put in extra cards like Thing from Below, primarily replacing things like Ancestral Knowledge that used to function as card draw. So that's the theory, that these big, powerful minions that you can play for too little mana in terms of the power curve can compensate for the lack of card draw. The problem is like, basically you're just getting overpowered stats, right, on the board, and Zoo is better than any other deck in the game at just beating stats. It doesn't matter how overpowered your stats are. If you're just playing stats, then Zoo can trade into them more effectively than you can play them.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I just played my 5/5, and Zoo is like, yeah, I have those 4 1/1s that I'm just going to buff with my Dark Alpha.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you played a 5/5 taunt for 3 mana? Well, I have a power overwhelming that costs me 1 that I'll just put on an imp. Like, cool
or poses
story.
Villager to just like actually get my 1/1 back.
So Peddler comes out again with this Discover bug. It picks up a Flame Imp, which is a solid choice. So he'll probably just be dumping the remainder of his hand here, just keeping the Doomguard isolated, hoping that he draws a card that costs 2 or less on the next turn so that he can go all in with the Doomguard.
Still, amazing position for Crane. He can easily trade his 1/1s into the 3/1 and the 1/1. On this turn, possibly maybe, like he can play all the minions except for Doomguard.
Yep.
Great spot.
Exactly right. Just dump the hand and just there's a decent chunk of the deck left that costs 2 or less that he'll be able to play on turn 7 alongside the Doomguard and end up discarding nothing. So
I think he might be thinking at the moment about trading with the 2/2 as well. It's like kill the 1/1 with the 2/2 to have more minions on the board.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, good stuff, good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing everything this turn. It's just all about his positioning. What am I going to trade into next turn? What numbers do I want on the board to attack with? Do I want the taunt next to the Direwolf Alpha so that immediately gets the buff if he has to attack into it, etc.? I think there was no doubt on what the eventual play was. It's just working out the exact optimal sequence of attacks and optimal positionings on the board.
And that's one of the things that actually selects, like it shows that the player is really great with Zoo and just like a Zoo pilot. Because if you can position your minions well, you'll have this extra damage you need to win the game.
Yeah.
You will have just much more value out of it. Positioning Zoo is so important. Like where is your Imp Gang boss? And as you mentioned, like Voidwalker actually being next to the Direwolf Alpha.
Yep, 2, 4, 6, 8, 11, plus the +1 buff from the Direwolf to the Doomguard is Xaxes, if I've counted that correctly. So the positioning didn't end up mattering too much in terms of picking up the trades, but as you said, positional concern's a big thing that separates an average Zoo player that maybe can hit Legend with the deck just fine and a guy that's going to win a major with Zoo, right?
Exactly. So 1/1, Crane wins with the Zoo, which means Shaman is dead on both sides. Warlock is alive still for Crane, and C4mlann still has his Warrior and Druid left. Yep. This is Dragon Warrior and Token Druid, where Crane has Token Druid himself. and that Zoo. And this matchup is really interesting. Like Dragon Warrior versus Zoo, I've heard different opinions on this. What is yours?
Straight away, before I answer that question, I didn't realize Crane was running Ooze in his deck. This is not something that I was made aware of. So that straight away is going to change the potential of this matchup a little bit.
It does definitely, because like I didn't know as well, but you're right. Fiery War Axe is one of the cards you really want versus Zoo, and if you're denied one swing, plus there's a free 2 on the board, this is going to be a great card in the matchup.
Yeah, but you know, overall, I think the matchup against Dragon Warrior, like, are we certain this is Dragon Warrior? Because you can play Inner Rage in Dragon Warrior, that's fine, but it's not 100% all in every build, so...
I'm 80% sure it's Dragon Warrior.
Right.
I just had like a glimpse, like 1 minute before we started, a glimpse at the deck list.
Okay.
And a couple of cards checked, but maybe I just saw a Ravaging Ghoul, Grommash, and a Dragon.
All right. Well, for now, we'll talk as if it's Dragon Warrior, because essentially you have 4 Fiery War Axes in a deck. This is a point that has been hammered into the ground. You have the 2 Alex Strauss champion and the 2 Fiery War Axe. There's a Whirlwind as well, Nymph, and a Bloodhoof Brave, and a Battle Rage.
Looks like I've been watching a wrong deck list. Then.
Yeah. All right. So let's abandon that thought. This looks like it's very much going to be Patron Warrior instead. So I'm looking forward to this, and this is an interesting story, honestly, because Crane himself is one of the kings of Patron. He was one of the best players of Warsong Patron back in the day, someone that a lot of top players basically went to for Patron coaching, honestly, that when many of the people that were successful with the deck learned a lot of it from him. And he was one of the innovators of the current form of standard Patron without Deathspite in it. So he hasn't chosen to bring Patron to this tournament, but yet his first opponent here in top 16 has. So he will use all of his knowledge to be able to defeat his own creation here.
And he will need all of that knowledge, because this matchup is actually pretty good for Patron.
It's really good for Patron.
You bring Patron specifically to kill Zoo.
Yeah.
But yeah, Uz did its work. Unfortunately for Crane, there is a second Fire War Axe, which is still going to stay there. And what do you think about opening from... you also played tons of Patrons,
Yes.
so can you please assess the C4mlann's hand in opening overall?
It's definitely above average, I would say. He was missing like Blood to Ichor, which is a huge card you'd love to have. No Ravaging Ghouls as of yet, but drawing both Fiery War Axes, anytime you get a couple of removal things, be it a Fiery War Axe and a Slam, a Fiery War Axe and a Blood to Ichor, and then you back that up by at least 1 minion by turn 3 or 4, that's basically like the dream start that you want against Zoo. So some combination of Blood to Ichor, Fiery War Axe, Slam, Acolyte of Pain, Bloodhoof Brave, that's kind of what you're looking for a lot of the time. So he's picked up 3 of those cards, so he'd have to be happy with his opening so far. Especially since he just got the spare Fiery War Axe after his first one got oozed away.
Yeah, it worked well. Blood to Ichor. Yeah, it doesn't look bad. But from Zoo's perspective, this matchup, as you mentioned, is really bad. And what you want to do, you want to just rush your opponent down before he can actually get those Whirlwinds, Patrons, and stabilize on board. So you want to deal damage every turn and have sticky minions, possibly get Imp Gang Boss, which he didn't get. I guess Uz was alright in the beginning to deal with the first Fire War Axe.
Yep. Does have options this turn, but none of them look much more appealing than just dropping the Bloodhoof Brave. It is a kind of scary situation. Looks like he's going to go for the clear play here, which is interesting to me. I kind of like just dropping the Bloodhoof there and then trying to access the clearing play on the next turn where I have a little bit more mana available to me, and I might actually be able to activate a Battle Rage in the same turn, but
there's a
I'm going to try and answer the board straight away here.
Yeah, I think it's mostly because Luminar Vargas is a possibility. And
sure.
You do have this Bloodhoof Brave as the next card you're going to play. So, and also like Battle Rage, you just enable Battle Rage to draw 2 cards.
Right, but there was 1 and 2 health minions on the board, right? So if the Argus is set up, then the minions either trade in and die or trade in and remain on 1 health afterwards, and then you still have that Whirlwind sat in your hand. So I don't think Argus would have been the end of the world, but I'm not going to say any play where you clear Zoo's board is incorrect, because
exactly.
That is usually your game plan. It's just sometimes it's about, you know, deliberately passing up clearing it on 1 turn so you get a more beneficial clear the turn afterwards. That's what I personally would have looked to do with the Bloodhoof Brave.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a valid point as well. So now he still has the Battle Rage into Frothing. First, draw the card, see what's up.
Nothing too exciting to do with that 2-1 this turn, but yep, the Battle Rage does go off, gets his 2 cards, and he does have the Frothing to develop as well. So he's got himself into a reasonable position here. But yeah, 2-1 on this board is not the most exciting minion.
It's not the most exciting minion, but at least it will be able to buff Frothing +2 attack. The only question is, like, where do you put the 2-1?
Well, that's my question. Do you bother, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, is it exciting enough to make any of these trades in order to buff, or do you just jam to face? I think the face attack is just better, because what relevance does the 4-attack Frothing have right now, right?
The only thing I can think about is just getting the Divine Shield off and forcing your opponent to trade 1-1 into something, but then there's still the Possessed Villager. So if you have buffs, you can still just run Possessed Villager into Frothing.
So yeah, one thing that Crane will definitely be keeping an eye on in this matchup is the Whirlwind count. He's seen 1 Whirlwind be used, and he, of course, has Forbidden Rituals in his deck. So he will be trying to decide what the correct point, if he was to draw a Forbidden Ritual, is to play it, because Ravaging Ghoul is one of the most devastating things you can possibly get. Like, in any play, like Ravaging Ghoul against Forbidden Ritual is one of the most devastating things that can happen to you in this game. So he really needs to find a point to make those sorts of things happen, and the Whirlwind effects in the Warrior deck are one of the most effective tools against this kind of deck. But for now, he picks up a very effective trade with the Direwolf and the Abusive Sergeant into the Frothing, drops down the Voidwalker, again positioned well next to the buff immediately.
Ooh.
And now the Patron has been picked up.
Yeah.
Only 2 Patrons can be generated, but they'd be generated against just a 2-2 and a 2-3 on the board. So
one of them can die, but the other can actually
Exactly.
spawn more patrons.
right.
And from Crane's perspective, like facing those patrons, if you don't get the buff, it might be really dangerous, because if there is a Ravaging Ghoul as a follow-up to those patrons, that's a tough board to have.
Yeah, I like it. You have to be a little bit more aggressive with Patrons these days. Like, the days where you could just spend a turn delightedly equipping a Death Spite are gone, right? Like, Death Spite made magical things happen with Patrons. Very often these days, you just have to be happy with 2 Patrons if they're on a board like this where there's no immediate answer. Unfortunately for CamLlann, the Abusive Sergeant was picked up, though, which will enable the trades.
Yeah, there is an answer.
denial of more Patrons.
There's not only an answer, but also like a perfect curve in Gang
Sure.
Boss. But are you that sad about it, though? Because, in a rage. Oh, man, CamLlann is just making a face.
Yeah.
But those minions had to trade versus your board, and right now you are able to play this Battle Brave with Zoo having no cards. And slowly you're getting, with this in range of Grommash, Inner Rage will be 12 points of damage. So that's a pretty good card to get.
That is
Wow.
kind of crazy. So play Doomguard, attack with Doomguard first, and then trade the Abusive, I guess, is the
Yep.
best play.
Yeah, it is absolutely the best play. I can't see anything else. And then you just lifed up as well, because why not?
I mean, it seems fairly obvious, but there's a small consideration, because you can actually choose to increase your power on the board, right? You can spawn an extra 1-1 and take extra damage on the Doomguard, but still keep the Doomguard alive, and that way, instead of losing a 2-1, you gain a 1-1.
I think I'd still prefer to just
I do
put
too.
only 2 damage on Doomguard.
I do too, but Crane disagrees.
Crane disagrees. He goes for a bigger board, basically.
Yeah.
So he says, I've seen double Whirlwind already. I haven't seen Execute, though. But if Execute is there, my Doomguard dies regardless?
Yes. I guess that is the thinking. So he would rather have a wider board where the power is spread out than a narrower board where more of the power is consolidated into the target that will get executed. And I buy it. My only concern is that I still feel like, you know, Ravaging Ghoul is potentially a card within CamLlann's range right now, but I guess the first Whirlwind that was used would have been a Ravaging Ghoul if he had Ravaging Ghoul. The second one had to be a Whirlwind because it was a Patron turn. So, like, mentally, I haven't personally ruled out Ravaging Ghoul from his hand, but
Also,
Crane's read is correct.
Ravaging Ghoul will just spawn another Imp.
Oh, you could actually, like, you have plenty of life to play with, so you could execute the Imp Gang boss and then just Ravaging Ghoul and have the Ravaging Ghoul contest the Doomguard.
Yeah, makes sense, makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's another Whirlwind effect. So if Warrior is running out of Whirlwind effects, Patrons are not that powerful anymore.
Agreed.
In a sense.
Yeah. Argus is a huge pickup here. This has been the kind of the story in this matchup, is that every turn where CamLlann has asked an awkward question, you know, can you kill these Patrons? Do you have the buff to deny the card draw? Every time Crane has been able to pick it up so far. So.
Yeah, and Crane is in an amazing position. There is a Patron pickup by CamLlann, and he still has an Inner Rage. But this board from Zoo is actually getting really serious, and this is not a deck that runs Brawl. Does it run Revenge at least?
Nope.
No Revenge.
Not if he's playing a standard-ish list anyway. Definitely no Revenge in there, no Brawl for sure. But yeah, this is starting to look a little bit uncomfortable. And that Inner Rage that just came out one card further on. If he'd have just, you know, I said at the time, you know, you really have to get out of the habit of being too greedy with your patrons. In this particular world, if we were being incredibly results-oriented, you know, the greed would have paid off because he could have got extra patrons out. But also you have to consider at the same time, like if he didn't do it that turn, he was essentially giving Crane a free whole other turn to develop more minions on the board. So it might have been that Crane could have just easily dealt with 4 patrons the next turn if he'd have had more development.
It's just amazing that Zoo, you know, you try to kill those minions. You have one whirlwind, second whirlwind, you have patrons, you do a lot of stuff, but the board still returns. The power of the hero power is just amazing in the deck.
And it's why Ravaging Ghoul is so much better than just Whirlwind itself in this matchup, because Whirlwind's great, but unless you have like a minion to develop alongside it, which requires another specific card, it doesn't stop their next wave of attacks. Whereas Ravaging Ghoul does both in one. It clears the board, and then you have this 3/3 sat around that can then contest the next wave.
Now with a PO pickup, he will be able to clear Grom. It's not lethal yet, unless he actually wants to go for face and leave
5,
Grom,
6,
because
8, 10.
Grom might be difficult though. Like, if there is a way to deal with the 3/2, can you die? You've seen double weapon already. And there are no more charges in this deck.
So, yeah, you've seen 2 Fiery War Axes already.
I'm thinking like double Inner Rage, let's say, right?
Korkron is possible. So, like, Execute plus Inner Rage plus Korkron is a way you lose. And I feel like in this situation, if you can think of a way you lose that is at all possible, then kill the Grom.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
You're so far ahead.
Yeah.
Like, don't throw the game to some random combination of 3 cards that he might have.
And so he does clear the Gromash, and C4mlann, just looking at his board, he does pick up Pyromancer, be able to have one effect, but it's not enough. And Crane actually wins this impossible matchup with Zoo.
Impossible matchup.
Impossible because it's like big, more than 55%.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of my point, right? Is that is a matchup that I will happily describe as like incredibly patron favored, but that it
Give me the percentage. Give me the percentage.
I think like 65 patron.
All right, that's more than I've heard this weekend overall in any matchup actually.
Yeah. I think it's a really good matchup. But yeah, I think there's probably 2 matchups, maybe 3, that are like 70% in this game or better in terms of like actual meta decks at the top level of the meta. So.
Well,
Anyway.
after Stan Sivka said that Freeze Mage versus Rogue is not that Rogue unfavored as people think, I'm like, all right, we're back to 50-50.
Yeah, very, very true.
But from experience, yeah, there are some matchups that are definitely favored. And right now we are going to see Zoo versus Token Druid. What do you think this is? Like, this is favored for Zoo, or is it favored for Druid? Like, I think it's actually close to 50-50 overall.
I think it's pretty close, yeah. That card Innovate is a big deal, but I think, you know, on average it's maybe ever so slightly Zoo favored by a couple of percentage points, but it mainly because like most of the powerful Druid draws do hinge around that Innovate being in the opening hand. Like, Wild Growth quite often isn't quite good enough. We saw, for example, Bunny Hopper in the previous series. I was quite critical of his choice to keep both Wild Growths. I disagreed with that. It ended up that he, you know, pretty much had like 1 health to spare at the end of the game before he finally managed to turn all of that mana into a board advantage. So
I think I would even say that this matchup is more Zoo favored. Like, definitely, it's not like 50-50. I would say it's maybe 55-45 Zoo favored.
Sure.
Because, like, obviously there are innervates, but overall Zoo just does the normal thing, just builds up the board. And if Druid misses those extra super cards you really want to have early game and has just a normal hand, it's really hard to stop the aggression from Zoo.
That is a lot of mana in in C4mlann's hand.
Yeah, that's not something you want. Like, innervate and coin is great.
Yep.
You want it, but then afterwards it's super awkward. So what you can do here, maybe you just rump. So like you coin Wild Growth, next turn you innervate, nourish, get the crystals, get 2 mana.
And then you draw cards with the other nourish if you haven't drawn something good to do.
Yeah, you can also like Wrath on the next turn because
Sure.
you'll be able to like innervate, nourish, get 2 mana crystals, Wrath something on
Yes.
board. So I think that might be the play because the earlier you get Ancient of War, the earlier you get something like a Violet Teacher that you can play on board, the better. Especially because right now you don't have Mire Keepers, you don't have something to fight. So I like this wild group here definitely.
Yeah, I think so too. So this is the line that pretty much the Bunny Hopper ended up taking, where he spent his first 3 turns essentially doing nothing in terms of impacting the board, and then we saw it was a pretty crazy ending to the game where he just about managed to scrape it out, going down as low as like 3 health in the end, and then picking up the Feral Rage off the Raven Idol, stabilizing behind Taunt. So that's how fine the wire can get, because this deck can stabilize very quickly. It can pick up some very explosive removal spells. It has a ton of big taunts in it, so it can do the job of stabilizing, but it really like rides that line of dicing with death, of like spending too much time setting up.
Sometimes you can have like insane openings with like Fandro that stays alive and then you just go with all the spells, get all the benefits. But unlikely, like you will have to get the perfect hand. And if you get a normal hand, you have to work with what you have and mostly just run.
So the Living Roots that was drawn this turn, is that enough to distract you from the plan? I don't think so, right?
I don't think so.
We have to cast a Nourish here.
Yeah, you definitely cast Innervate Nourish, get 2 crystals. Now I'm just thinking, do you Wrath the 2/2 for free, or do you just like Living Roots it, or do you maybe create tokens? Like, because you will have 2 mana available to you. Just need to think what to do with those 2 mana points.
Yep. He's going to use the Wrath. I guess Living Roots is an easier card to fit in later because he's going to have 6 mana next turn. So if his play next turn is going to be Nourish to draw cards, he can then still fit in the Living Roots alongside that to snipe down maybe a Flame Imp that comes out if it's another 1-drop, 2-drop turn on turn 3. But again, unfortunately, Crane just has the powerful 3 mana plays here.
C4mlann would love to see Forbidden Ritual.
Yes.
That would be so good.
Yeah, he would immediately perk up in his chair if the Forbidden Ritual came out. But honestly, like, Councilman or Imgang Boss isn't terrible either. Swipe Hero Power will still take care of that quite nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely not bad. So whatever you choose, like, you have to consider what you do next turn. And what can Druid actually do to you? So if you go for Imgang Boss, if there is a Swipe Hero Power, you still end up with a 1/1. Like, whatever happens, you end up with a 1/1.
Yes. You keep a 1/1 pretty much whatever happens. So.
But I guess like if there's no movement from Druid, if he plays like a Violet Teacher with something, maybe it's better to have Imgang Boss to be able to buff it with Defender of Argus.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
So as we've mentioned, swipe is a possibility. Just swipe this board and finish one of the 1/1s with the hero power, which in theory actually denies, well, actually in practice it denies Defender of Argus because there will be only 1 minion on board.
Yep. Still plenty of refill for Crane to come afterwards. With 4 cards in Zoo's hand, you kind of expect them to be able to make a powerful play on just about any amount of mana that you give them. Their curve is just so flexible in that way, but I think, so basically the consideration here is like, I'm probably going to need to cast this Nourish at some point. Is this the point in the game where I'll be under the least pressure to do it? And I think you can swipe this turn, and then by using, like, say, Drake and Living Roots in combination later, you can find a turn where you're under less pressure than this to cast the Nourish. That's why I like using the swipe. C4mlann is going to disagree. He's going to draw his cards right now, so I'm imagining that was his same line of thinking. He's just come out with a different answer, which is that he thinks he's under as little pressure this turn as he's ever going to be.
I think that's one thing, and the other thing is that he might get more swipe value later, especially because he still has the Living Roots, so there is some wiggle room overall. I think like both decisions, like to swipe this turn to clear the board or to go with the Nourish, are fine. He has a lot of like endgame cards, and Token Druid is a combo deck, so you do want to have the card pairing, specifically Violet Teacher with the spells, Thunder with the spells. His hand is a bit awkward though, because he does have 3 spells, but swipes are not combo-genic, but they are amazing cards versus overall as removal cards. Like, you want to have them versus Zoo.
Combo-genic? I like that word. It's good. I've stolen. I'm going to use that now.
All right. You can use it.
Okay. So is this an Argus turn? Because it looks very much like an Argus turn.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, I think, no reason to not play Argus. The only question is, where do you play Argus to protect yourself from the swipe? And you might consider playing Argus between Possessed Villager and Dark Peddler.
Yeah, I think this is the best way to play around swipe, so I'm not surprised to see this happening at all.
Another Violet T-shirt is a bit clunky. Something like an Innervate. Innervate would be so sweet.
I mean, just Drake Innovate swipe if we had it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so no such luck for c4mlann. Both swipes in hand, but just not a very swipeable board. Swipe Hero Power and Living Roots. What does that do? So swipe the Imp Gang boss. We'll have 2-1, 3-1, 2-2, and another one being spawned. So yeah, I mean, even that isn't really too spectacular, right?
It's not terrible, though.
It's okay, sure, but it's, again, not a complete board clear. There'll just be another reload next turn. So.
And you do spend 2 spells out of your hand,
Yeah.
which should normally have a lot of spells. How many spells did he cast from the beginning of the game? Just so we know how Yogg
so
run.
Coin, Wild Growth, Innovate, both Nourishes, and a Wrath, at least. So six minimum.
All right, 6 spells. That's a good start, because at some point Yogg run will be relevant, especially when we get to like 10 plus spells and 10 plus mana.
It looks like he is going to go for the clear here, and it's a pretty involved turn, so I hope he's able to fit it in with the rope here. Looks like he's going to find enough time.
I think it's good because overall, with the first swipe, your opponent might not have. Might think like, hey, swipe is gone. I can go for my ritual this turn,
Sure.
and you are preparing the board for a second swipe. And if there is a ritual and he responds with Violet Teacher swipe, that's so good.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. But Ooze is actually not a bad pickup here. It's rare that you don't destroy a weapon with Ooze and think, yeah, actually, you know what? This is pretty
free
solid.
too.
Yeah, it's the weird thing about this deck now is like the 2-drops actually in terms of stats all just kind of suck. So like a 3-2 just being jammed on the board right now to be aggressive is actually pretty viable.
I've seen people play Huge Toad as well.
Right. I know Cirez was playing the Zoth Zoo that he had his huge toad in. So yeah, Cirez is a big innovator in terms of some wacky types of zoo decks.
But basically, it's like King's Alec that missed the draw.
Yeah, sure. But they play Knife Juggler, Dark Peddler. Like they're 2-mana 2/2s on the turn that they're played a lot of the time. So having a 2-mana 3/2 isn't that big of a deal, even though it's kind of generally considered as just a vanilla 3/2. It's just kind
Such
of
a good
bad
minion.
card these days. But yeah, I mean, it's just fine. Like it's gonna kill him if it's there. It's fine.
Yeah, and definitely Crane wants to pressure c4mlann. He wants to get in range. He would love to have Gormok activated as well, be able to deal 4 damage to some target.
Yeah.
Councilman is dangerous, so now back to c4mlann. He got a spell. This is not a spell he wanted to get. The biggest play, in a way, is double Violet T-shirt on this board.
That's what I'm looking at. Like, how brave are you, right? Because the glory of Drake's swipe next turn is just looks insane on this board, and it's hard to think of like too much they could add to this board that would stop Drake's swipe from being good. He's going to go for it. Tournament life on the line.
There's not much choice, actually, and doesn't pay off. This is 5 plus 3 damage. It's 8 plus 4. 5 actually is 13.
He's got it right.
Yeah.
Because the Councilman is going to keep growing from the minion buffs as well. So with all the buffs.
And the Gormok, Crane is able to eliminate c4mlann, and Crane goes to the top 8.
Yes. Crane is going to represent the might of Complexity Gaming in the top 8 of Dreamhack Valencia. So there's one at least very happy caster here, but I think that was a good series, about as good as we could expect from the kind of similar lineups that they had in the decks that we've seen quite a lot throughout, but still very exciting series, very, very well played between two players, one who's already kind of established himself to be very strong, and c4mlann, who's really starting to make a name for himself with some very consistent performances of his own. Dan, thoughts on that series?
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward. I think the ban differences are very interesting. I know a lot of people are choosing to ban Warriors. I wanted to see the statistics on it because I think Battlefy will sort out all the brackets and show us, but it's definitely a very large percentage. And yet the difference could be the fact that Crane chose to ban that Zoo Warlock, which ended up doing really well against the rest of the lineup. So some food for thought, because I know some players are definitely rethinking some of that, so it's cool. Also, cool to see Crane do another top 8 in a very hard tournament. I know HCT was very recent for some people for the Spring Championship, and being able to qualify in a streak like this is a very impressive feat. So that's what stuck out to me from that series.
I really like how he didn't ban Warrior, because the guys knew their each other decks.
Yeah.
So Crane was like, yeah, Patron, I know that deck. I can beat it with my Zoo.
Right.
Yeah, basically.
Exactly, right?
That's
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
interesting. Yeah, because I know a lot of people who see Patron, they think it's really good against Zoo and Shaman, and you chose not to ban it. Can you just talk a little bit about why specifically?
Well, okay, so one thing is my strategy coming into the tournament was banning Warlock, and I did really well with it. So in order to like ban something different, I would have to have a huge incentive. And then I was looking at his Patron list and I was like, I mean, this is just Patron. There's a reason why I don't bring it. I don't think it's strong enough. Sure, it's favored against the Zoo. It really is. But Shaman, it's not that bad for the Shaman. And it's like the Yogg Druid is also a strong deck against it, I think. And you can just have those weird draws with Patron. So even against Zoo, you have it like Zoo has a decent chance. And especially with the Ooze tech. So.
Spoken from the Patron expert himself. You can't patron the Patron expert.
TLDR version, Patron sucks. That's what he wants to say.
Which is amazing because on paper it should look good against Shaman, Zoo, and even Yogg Druid to a certain extent. If it's so token based, you do have like these whirlwind effects. So at least it puts up a more reasonable fight on paper. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff there. How much does this play to your strengths now that you know other people's deck lists from all the round 16? Do you feel like that gives you the confidence you need moving forward to day 3?
I feel very confident in that type of like environment where you know the other guys' decks. I think I will use it to my advantage better than the other guys. But how big of an advantage? I don't know. Like, but I do think it's an advantage for me, as small as it may be.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. For your top 8 performances in multiple big tournaments now, do you feel like this is just kind of the streak that variance eventually catches up because you've been playing for a while, or do you feel like this is finally starting to turn the page where like you feel like you have that edge over players right now, and you're a player to watch out for?
I think like last year I didn't play enough big tournaments, like, and now I'm starting to go to more big tournaments, and I feel more comfortable like at them and like used to it. So it's like part that I'm more comfortable, but also just I think I'm a pretty good player, and you know, eventually it's gonna happen.
You're okay, dude.
So
You're all
it's
right,
like
man.
I've
You're
heard some
hanging
good
there.
things. Yeah.
You're at least like one of the 4 best players at this caster area.
Yeah.
So definitely, you're sitting in very good company.
Yeah.
And now you're also
I'm fairly sure that math checks out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, that is true.
I'm only ranked 4 non-legend, man. That's actually that's my pro tip, by the way. When you're going to big tournaments, remember to be a scrub rank on ladder.
Ooh, yeah, get players
It's
to,
really-
to underestimate.
Like,
you.
serious point though. That just shows you've been practicing properly, right? Like you've been running sets against other people and not just playing ladder. That's the excuse. Even if that's not true,
Yeah.
just use that as the excuse.
Yeah,
There you
so
go.
yeah, it's totally.
You're-
That's a
Nailed
good
it.
excuse.
I mean,
reaffirming the rank 12
I
player
have
chat.
been. I actually practiced a bit as well with 6 for Star Ladder, and I was just the decks I played for this tournament were decks that I'd already played a bunch on ladder
Sure.
up until, so like I was very comfortable with these decks. Well, okay, I'm not the best Zoo player in the world, but I think I'm good enough.
Your positioning was really good overall.
Yeah, but there was like a turn where I was like down to the rope, and I was like, okay, yeah, the abusive should have been on the other side of that peddler. Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you'll always be able to spot it a moment too late, but it's all good, man. A win's a win. So a job well done. You move on to the round of 8. So congratulations, Crane. Do you have any guys want to ask any final questions before we send up to our final series?
Maybe
Good for me.
I would just ask the question about the ooze in the zoo. So like, what was the logic behind including that card?
Well, so I'd use the ambassador of Cancer in my practice group, and he said you just if you want to ban the Warlock, you just bring an ooze. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, I mean, sometimes his argument wasn't the Doomhammer. His argument was the War Axis. You play against Warrior, yeah, but you still get wins where they have the War Axe draw and you have the ooze. I was like, okay, yeah, well,
And
the other card I would have to fit in was not that exciting, so I was happy with the
All right.
ooze.
And how did it work during the tournaments? And would you like change it back and cut the ooze for the top 8, or you're happy to keep it?
Yeah, it hit some War Axes, so I guess that's fine enough. And if the other card it could have been like a Crazed Alchemist. I'm happy with it actually, even though I always tell people it sucks.
Yeah.
I would also never play it on ladder, by the way.
Do we have time for Crane to explain his full theory on tech cards on air? Is that a thing we can dive
They
in?
suck. I mean,
There you go. Nailed it.
unless you're playing
We're out of
tournaments.
time. Look at that.
Unless you're playing tournaments.
That was plenty of time, man.
Thanks.
But I think it's a really good philosophy to follow if you want to see Crane and just kind of follow his upward trajectory. He's been doing really well so far. He's yet another person's book his ticket to the top 8 tomorrow for day number 3. So that brings us to our last match today, which is Tars versus Phenomeno. That's going to be coming up here in just a second. We're going to have a very short break, we promise. And we come back, the last series of Day 2 here at Dreamhack Valencia 2016. Stay tuned.